Hello and welcome, Exiles, to a look at a 100% Mind Over Matter build combined with a little bit of Vaal Flameblast action. Now, this character is something I find a bit of an interesting concept because it's a scenario where you actually don't care about your ES or life at all. You convert all your damage taken to your mana, and then from that point onward, you can leverage some weird stuff like Divine Flesh with CI, which normally would be like a thing that couldn't work paradoxical because Divine Flesh makes all damage bypass your ES and CI makes your HP 1, so you'd think you'd die in one hit, but you don't because 100% of the damage is going to your mana instead. Now, this is a very, very, how do I put this? Forced, multiple pieces of items are forced in this build, is how I should say this. Because to get to 100% Mind Over Matter, it takes three key items, really. Foulborn Mind of the Council is number 1, Eilar Dex is number 2, and Font of Thunder is number 3. Why are these three key items necessary for 100% Mind Over Matter? And I'm going to break it down. So, the concept is, essentially, we're using Mind of the Council, which has a huge mana damage taken from Mana Before Life mod, but it only works on physical and lightning. The key to making this item work for Mind Over Matter is how do we get rid of taking cold, fire, and chaos damage. If we can get rid of taking those damage types, then all of a sudden this helmet can work as effectively 35% Mind Over Matter. Now, those damage types are dealt with A, Chaos Inoculation for not taking damage as chaos, and B, Font of Thunder. This is where this shield comes in. It has a 40% fire and cold taken as lightning. Now, there's some weird bugginess with this where technically, mathematically, it makes sense that we would only need a normal roll with 40% combined with Divine Flesh and the Hunter Bound by Destiny mod. That should give us 100% damage for cold and fire taken as either chaos or lightning, but it doesn't for some reason. There's like, I don't know, some rounding error. I don't freaking know the math behind it or why it works this way, but basically you can just instantly randomly fall over to a fire or cold dot if you don't have at least a 41% roll on this shield, which requires a volatile Vaal. Somebody in my chat said that maybe if you have positive fire and cold res, then you can just use a 40% shield. I have not tested this. That might work that way. I do not know. But the TLDR is there's some wonkiness around this, and that's why we wanted a Foulborn, or we wanted a volatile Vaal version of the shield. The other 10% I was talking about, Bound by Destiny, if I can find where it is right here. Elemental damage taken as chaos, so that takes us to roughly 50%. And then Divine Flesh, another 50% of elemental damage is taken as chaos. So what ends up happening is 60% of the damage goes to chaos, which we are damage immune to because we are CI, and then 40% goes to lightning. So we've effectively taken fire and cold out of the picture by diverting it to taking the damage as something else, and chaos we took out of the picture with chaos inoculation. So that effectively means physical and lightning from this helmet will work as Mind Over Matter percentage because the other damage types we just can't take. 35% is a good starting point. From there, Mind Over Matter gives 40%, so we're up to 75% Mind Over Matter. Hierophant gives 10%, so we're at 85% Mind Over Matter. The Watcher's Eye mod, which I have to figure out where I put that. Watcher's Eye is 10% itself, so that takes us to 95%. And that last crucial 5% is done via the Eilar Dex. Hence, these three items are mandatory to reach 100% Mind Over Matter, at least in a regular trade league. In standard, there's some legacy gear that you can get there other ways, but in a trade league, this is the three mandatory pieces to do it. Eilar Dex gives you 1% Mind Over Matter per power charge, and we are sitting at 5 minimum power charges. Hence, we are at 100% Mind Over Matter. This is something that technically could be done before Volatile Vaals, but it required you, A, to use a Purity of Lightning Watcher's Eye mod to get above the 40-40 roll, and then B, it required like 10 minimum power charges instead of a Volatile Vaal version of the helmet, which is pretty limiting in terms of build making. I did it previously on like a 10D budget character I made one league, which that was my first experience doing a Mind Over Matter character with this sort of setup. And Volatile Vaal gives you a lot more freedom in build creation. Specifically, I wanted to do Vaal skills because I wanted to use the Vaal Temptation support, which basically just lets you spam a Vaal skill while you're clearing a map, which is a lot of fun. A lot of Vaal skills are really fun mapping abilities. And number two, I also wanted to use Vaal Sacrifice support. This support is kind of interesting here as well with 100% Mind Over Matter, because its downside says supported skills sacrifice all but one of your life and all but one of your ES. And that is actually a very big downside, but for a 100% Mind Over Matter build where you're playing with Divine Flesh, where all damage goes past your ES anyways, it's not a downside at all. I can eat all that ES and it doesn't matter. That ES is cosmetic. It's not defending me at all. And so effectively, it gives you a guaranteed second cast on your Vaal skill. So this combined with this is pretty neat for basically being able to spam cast while you're going around maps. That was kind of like the core concept of the build. Some of the tertiary things that we added into this character is, for example, I spent a bunch of time making some warlord items. You'll notice on my character I actually have 6 warlord items because I was actually going for a high amount of max endurance charges combined with adrenaline PDR, combined with PDR from Determination, PDR from a Turtle. And the reason I'm stacking all this physical damage reduction is because Vaal Temptation has a very big degen on our character. Now, one of the ways this character fell short was I was hoping I could get some more mana regen than I ended up with. We ended up with around, let's see if I can find it real quick. It should be closer to 2,000 once I have like Arcane Surge procced, which I don't proc unless I like hit an enemy with a spell in a map. Let me just showcase that real quick. 1,400, and then we'll Frost Blink and 1,700. So yeah, our mana regen was only a little bit under 2k. Now we had a lot of DR because obviously we have Divine Flesh, 60% damage of elementals going to chaos, and we just mitigate that. We have a bunch of endurance charges. We have PDR from permanent adrenaline. We have a lot of this damage reduction, but the sustain was probably still a bit more lacking than what I would have liked. In terms of like when I'm proccing Arcane Cloak, I'm like, nah, I'm barely net sustaining when I have a couple stacks of Vaal Temptation. So it's a bit spooky in that regard. But that was kind of the concept, is I was stacking a bunch of endurance charges and combining it with the 100% Mind Over Matter to try to sustain the Vaal Temptation. It worked, and it's fine for mapping. I ultimately wouldn't particularly recommend this character. I don't think it's like that strong. It's just kind of a fun, a way to build a Vaal skill character if you want to. The biggest issues I see with doing 100% Mind Over Matter character with a Vaal skill character is like one of your biggest supports you could go for damage is, for example, Archmage. And Archmage has a line that says, doesn't work with Vaal skills. So there's some stuff here where I was just doing this because I wanted to do it for fun, not necessarily because I think it's the best way to build this character, but I just wanted to build with, specifically, I like Vaal Flameblast. I think it's a really fun, cool skill to play with. Obviously, I also am using the new pack that lets you get an additional cast. So whenever I would go to do single target, I would proc this, and then I could get multiple Vaal casts in a row. And the biggest, I want to say, like, issue is when you run into targets that are tanky enough where they don't just die in one hit. For the most part, all map bosses, you're going to pretty much kill in one shot. But let's say Uber bosses and let's say nightmare maps with tank mods, you're not going to kill in one shot, which will end up giving you a situation where you'll cast, you'll do half the HP or whatever, and then you'll be like, oh, let me wait for my Vaal souls to generate. And then you'll proc and you'll cast again, and you'll have that sort of situation go on. Granted, you do get some souls back for the damage you deal to enemies, but that's where the damage limitation of the character is in Vaal soul generation. I tried this sort of setup with a Vaal skill build in Phorecia League, and the advantage it had is it had an ascendancy point that basically gave half cost. Still ran into a similar issue where once you run out of those souls, you're kind of just excuse me, you're playing a little bit of a waiting game. So that's kind of something that's going on there. Another thing for this character is I decided to go with like really heavy into block. Basically all my clusters are block based. You probably could have done pushed mana closer to 10k and not gone block. Which maybe that would have been the right call, have better sustain and stuff like that. But I don't know. I like avoidance, so I tagged it in. So yeah, this is my build I made with 100% Mind Over Matter. Just kind of fun to do things with these 3 items. The biggest issue with this sort of build is when you're forcing this many gear slots, it becomes really, really limited on what other things you can do with it. So that's the biggest bummer about it. But other than that, I had a lot of fun making this character. Just wanted to showcase the little fun build we made over the past couple of days, doing Vaal skills with 100% mind over matter. And the next build I'm gonna try to do is I think a face breaker. I really want to do an Iron Fortress Ivory Tower build. So I think I'm gonna do a Facebreaker Luminary with that, and we'll see how that goes. Anyways, as always, thanks for watching Exiles. Hopefully you enjoyed. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one, guys.